Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking a truly fascinating journey into the complex, sometimes bewildering world of current events.
That's right.
You've provided us with a really diverse stack of sources, covering everything from high-stakes geopolitical maneuvering
And the subtle shifts in our daily lives.
to surprising scientific discoveries and, well, the ever-evolving landscape of technology.
Exactly. Our mission today is basically to cut through all that noise.
Right.
We'll identify the most important nuggets of knowledge, the things that truly matter, and critically connect those seemingly disparate dots for you.
Think of this as your personal shortcut, maybe, to being incredibly well-informed.
Giving you those aha moments that make sense of it all.
Yeah, without feeling completely overwhelmed by just the sheer volume of information out there.
So let's get into it. Let's unpack this.
Okay. Our journey begins where the stakes are arguably highest. The intricate realm of geopolitical crosscurrents. It's a world constantly in motion. Let's start with what feels like a perpetually volatile area, the shifting sands of U.S.-Iran relations and nuclear diplomacy.
Always something happening there.
Definitely. We've seen some intense recent escalations that have, garnered global attention. Reports indicate that both the U.S. and Israel have conducted strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities.
Right, and interestingly, Iran's supreme leader, in his first public address since these incidents, he asserted quite defiantly that the United States has gained no achievements from these strikes.
It's a bold claim, isn't it?
It really is, especially when you consider the international reaction. Belarus's President Lukashenko, for instance, he didn't mince words at all.
What did he say?
He unequivocally condemned these strikes, called them clear violations of international law. And what's particularly chilling about his condemnation is the parallel he drew.
Which one?
He likened these actions to the Chernobyl disaster. He warned of catastrophic global consequences if there's any tampering with critical nuclear infrastructure.
Wow, invoking Chernobyl.
Yeah. He underscored the very real risks, radioactive fallout spreading across continents, emphasizing that even supposedly limited strikes on nuclear sites carry immense, unpredictable dangers.
And Iran's response was equally direct.
Yeah.
Right. Even if maybe a bit contradictory.
Exactly. Its parliament made the significant decision to suspend cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA.
Okay, why?
Well, their justification was that the agency had allegedly failed to condemn these attacks. Tehran saw that as, abandoning their role.
So a political statement.
Pretty much. Yet, despite this public defiance, the Iranian foreign minister did admit to serious damage to nuclear sites following the U.S. strikes.
Oh, okay. So one hand projects invulnerability, the other quietly acknowledges the hit.
It's a classic diplomatic tightrope walk, isn't it? Reflects Iran's need to project strength, both domestically and internationally, while also subtly signaling the cost of the conflict.
Makes sense.
And what's truly fascinating here, I think, and a key insight into this whole complex dynamic, is the duality of the U.S. approach to Iran. It's quite stark.
How so?
On one hand, you have a very hardline stance, almost mirroring Israel's own aggressive posture. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz, he stated quite clearly in an interview that Israel would have targeted Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei if possible.
Really? Targeted Khamenei himself?
That's what he said. And he asserted no U.S. approval was needed for such an operation.
No U.S. approval needed. That's a powerful statement.
It is, but it proved unfeasible, apparently. Sources reported Khamenei had gone into deep hiding, severed communications.
Right, so that's the hardline side. What's the other side?
Well, then you pivot to the complete opposite end of the spectrum, diplomacy and economic incentives. We've learned that former President Donald Trump was reportedly considering a massive plan.
How massive?
$30 billion. Massive. Aimed at encouraging Iran back to nuclear negotiations.
$30 billion. Where would that come from?
It wasn't just a simple handout. It was highly complex, largely funded by Arab allies, apparently. And it involved significant steps. Easing sanctions.
Okay.
Unlocking a substantial $6 billion in frozen Iranian assets.
Right.
And even replacing the recently struck Fordo nuclear facility with a brand new civilian-only plant backed by Gulf states.
Wow. So replacing a facility they just struck.
Exactly. It's a real carrot and stick approach, but, I mean, with some very large carrots indeed.
It definitely sounds like it.
And this duality, it isn't just about saving face. It seems like strategic ambiguity, right? Designed to keep everyone guessing about the true extent of the damage and Tehran's next move. It highlights how nations, even in conflict, try to maintain multiple pathways.
Confrontation and negotiation, both on the table.
Exactly, to maximize their leverage. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these constant tensions, well, they leave Tehran residents deeply shaken, according to BBC observations.
I can imagine.
Even as the capital tries to return to its old rhythms, that underlying fear, the uncertainty, it's palpable, which raises a really important question.
Have this fundamentally changed things?
Yeah, has this prolonged Israel-Iran conflict fundamentally changed the Middle East? The ongoing conflicts, the shifting alliances, they certainly suggest a regional transformation is underway. Groups like Hamas are reportedly struggling, facing challenges from defiant clans, uncertainties linked to their Iranian ties. It's a region continually being reshaped.
It really feels that way. Okay, so from the intricate dynamics of the Middle East, let's shift our gaze now to Europe. Internal divides, external pressures. It's playing out intensely between Russia, NATO, and Ukraine.
Another complex hotspot.
For sure. NATO recently made a significant commitment, didn't they, to increase defense spending?
That's right, up to 5% of GDP by 2035, as a direct response to what they perceive as a long-term threat from Russia.
And that's a move that even former U.S. President Trump apparently praised.
Yeah.
He's always pushed for more European spending.
He has. However, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, well, he was quick to dismiss this increased spending, called it inconsequential to Russian security.
Really? Inconsequential?
That was his word. He argued Russia's objectives are transparent and lawful under international law, and he very pointedly criticized NATO expansion and Western support for Ukraine's membership as the root causes of the conflict.
So blaming NATO.
Pretty much. From Moscow's perspective, NATO is fueling an arms race and manipulating public fear to justify its military buildup. It's a stark contrast in narratives, almost diametrically opposed. Each side paints the other as the aggressor.
And it gets even more specific, right, with other Russian officials criticizing the plan.
Yeah, Russian Foreign Ministry official Vladislav Maslenikov further critiqued NATO's defense planning. He basically questioned the logic of a long-term spending goal for what NATO calls an imminent threat.
How so?
He called it illogical and mathematically inconsistent, likened it to planning for a five-alarm fire by setting a budget for new fire trucks a decade from now, implying a fundamental disconnect from Russia's viewpoint.
Interesting analogy. It definitely raises questions about strategic timelines.
And adding to the already escalating nuclear and military tensions, you have this controversy around Estonia.
What's happening there?
Estonia's openness to hosting nuclear-capable F-35 fighter jets.
And Russia's reaction.
Predictably strong. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov labeled it a direct threat and serious provocation, called Tallin's position absurd.
So more tension.
Absolutely. From Moscow's viewpoint, NATO's military activities near its borders are violations of post-Cold War assurances. And their response has been swift, deploying tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus, conducting joint military exercises.
Tactical nukes in Belarus. Whoa. That's serious.
Very. And it's worth noting, the UK is also procuring 12 F-35A jets to reestablish its own airborne nuclear deterrent capabilities. So it contributes to what's becoming a really dangerous game of nuclear poker. Each move just ratchets up the tension.
It certainly feels that way. And within all this, the Ukraine conflict just continues to extract a devastating human cost.
It really does. We've seen the grim reality, the ongoing exchange of bodies between Russia and Ukraine. It's heartbreaking.
Absolutely. And just recently, a Russian strike killed 3 people, wounded 14 in Dnipropetrovsk. It just underscores the relentless nature of this conflict on civilians. The fighting grinds on.
It does. But despite the ongoing hostilities, the profound human cost, there has been, well, a glimmer maybe, a faint one, of a path to diplomacy.
Really?
Russian President Vladimir Putin has expressed readiness for a third round of negotiations with Kyiv, said the discussions should focus on draft memorandums to resolve the crisis.
Is that genuine or just tactical maneuvering?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Given the deep mistrust, whether it translates into meaningful progress remains to be seen.
And complicating matters significantly for Ukraine, there's this major hurdle to its EU membership talks.
Right. Hungary's persistent veto.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán confirmed this.
Yes, citing overwhelming domestic opposition. Apparently, a national referendum showed 95% of Hungarian voters oppose Ukraine's EU accession.
95%. That's
Y- y-
overwhelming.
It is. Orban's been vocally critical of Ukraine's readiness for membership, raises doubts about its national identity, its borders, institutional stability.
And Hungary isn't alone in these doubts.
No. Slovakia and Poland have also voiced similar concerns. It reflects waning public support in those countries, too. Makes Ukraine's EU path much more complex politically than it might seem from Brussels.
So internal EU dynamics are a major factor.
Definitely. And it's further complicated by Russia's hardening stance against Ukraine's EU ambitions. Moscow now sees the EU as increasingly militarized, hostile. Former President Dmitry Medvedev even equated its threat level to NATO's.
Wow. So pushback from within the EU and strong opposition from Russia. Big challenges for Ukraine.
Absolutely. And on another note, related to the human impact, the UK recently made a controversial decision.
Oh, they're done.
They've begun rejecting asylum applications from Ukrainians.
Rejecting them. Why?
Their argument is that some regions, specifically Kiev and western Ukraine, are now generally safe.
Generally safe during an active war.
Exactly. Legal firms are reportedly getting weekly inquiries about these rejections. It raises serious concerns about the persecution threshold under the Refugee Convention, the legal test for refugee status.
That's a huge policy shift, isn't it? Given how many Ukrainians the UK initially took in.
It is. Over 300,000 had been offered asylum or sanctuary since 2022. So yes, a very significant change.
A stark reminder of how policy changes impact individuals fleeing conflict, forcing them back into precarious situations. Okay, beyond these major flashpoints, Middle East, Europe, there are other key diplomatic tensions globally.
Always more happening. In Asia, for instance, India has once again called for a permanent solution to its long-standing border dispute with China.
That's been simmering for a long time.
Decades. It's not just lines on a map. It's deep historical rivalry, strategic competition between two rising powers, global implication.
Right. And something historical.
Yeah, the 50th anniversary of the controversial German-Brazilian nuclear agreement was recently marked. Berlin emphasized its continued commitment to the peaceful use of atomic energy deal.
A Cold War-era agreement.
Exactly. Allowed Germany to export nuclear technology despite non-proliferation commitments. It's a complex legacy, carries the weight of decades of debate about nuclear safety and proliferation.
Okay. And then there was that strange case. Americans detained.
Oh, yeah. The bizarre case of Americans detained for trying to send rice, Bibles, and dollar bills to North Korea.
Rice, Bibles, and dollars. Seems harmless enough.
You'd think. But it just underscores the severe international tensions and regulations around even humanitarian aid to North Korea. In such a tightly controlled regime, any external influence, however well-intentioned, can be seen as a threat.
Just highlights the extraordinary paranoia, really.
It does. And lastly, within the EU itself, Spain's foreign policy is drawing some scrutiny.
For what?
Alleged double standards regarding human rights applications. Critics point to inconsistencies in how Spain addresses conflicts in the Middle East versus Eastern Europe, for example.
Suggesting politics influences human rights stances.
That's the criticism. It reflects broader debates about the EU's consistency in applying its human rights-based foreign policy standards globally.
Absolutely. The world truly is a complex, interconnected web. Okay, let's shift gears now, bring it closer to home. Let's delve into some domestic debates and shifting social landscapes, particularly in the U.S. and the U.K. So in the U.S., we're seeing some significant political tides, controversies, impacting lives daily. Let's start with immigration policy. It continues to have a profound economic and human impact.
Always a major issue.
The Trump administration, for example, implemented that newly reinstated and more refined travel ban. Affects over a dozen countries, mainly Africa, Middle East, Caribbean.
Right. And this policy has led to reports describing heightened scrutiny, detentions, and denied entries, even for people holding valid visas.
Even with valid visas.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
A high-profile example of the human impact was the case of Kabi Lame, the TikTok influencer.
I heard about that.
His situation got global attention, intensified criticism that the measure is discriminatory. And beyond individual cases, immigrant rights advocates argue the enforcement tactics, especially courthouse arrests by ICE, they undermine due process.
How so? Undermine due process.
By creating an environment of fear, it deters immigrant communities from seeking justice. They fear arrest if they show up for court, even as victims or witnesses.
Right. That makes sense. It creates a chilling effect.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting on the economic front. This policy is drawing significant backlash, not just ethically, but for its measurable economic consequences.
Okay, like what?
According to the World Travel and Tourism Council, the U.S. is projected to be the only country among 184 to face a tourism decline in 2025.
The only one. That's striking.
It is. They expect a staggering $12.5 billion loss in international travel spending.
$12.5 billion.
Wow. It just demonstrates that even seemingly domestic policy shifts have immediate, tangible global economic consequences. Challenges the idea that a nation can pursue isolationist policies without affecting its bottom line or its standing with allies like the UK, Germany, Canada, South Korea, whose citizens might just choose other destinations.
A clear ripple effect. Now, beyond the federal level, we see states taking action too, like Florida.
Yes, Florida Governor DeSantis' immigration enforcement strategy. It includes a highly controversial plan to house immigrants in tents in the Everglades.
Tents in the Everglades.
Yes, sparking a heated debate on human rights and the treatment of immigrants, especially since those lands are considered ancestral lands by Native Americans, raises concerns about desecration, environmental impact.
A complex intersection of issues there. State policy, human rights, indigenous claims, environment.
Exactly. And shifting to the political landscape, we're seeing the rise of progressive voices making their mark. Zohran Mamdani's victory in the New York primary, for example.
Yeah, that got a lot of attention.
Viewed as a significant achievement for progressive politics, particularly notable for his vocal support for Palestine.
And progressives see that stance as why he won.
That's their argument, yes. Signifying a shift towards more diverse and potentially polarizing viewpoints being embraced by voters in New York. His grassroots campaign focused on core progressive issues: housing justice, climate action, healthcare reform.
And claims of extremism against him.
Debunked after fact-checking, apparently, suggesting a strategic effort by some to discredit his platform.
Interesting. It highlights how international issues are influencing local politics more.
It seems so. Now, in education, the Trump administration initiated an investigation into the University of California system.
Over what?
Their hiring and enrollment practices, driven by diversity goals, reflects that broader national debate on affirmative action, equal opportunity versus the methods used to achieve diversity.
Okay, and turning to the courts. Some landmark judicial rulings from the Supreme Court.
Yes, some impactful decisions. They recently upheld a Texas law requiring websites with sexual material harmful to minors to verify visitors' ages.
Age verification online.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It's a potential game changer, yeah. Opens the door to sweeping internet age verification, could fundamentally change how we access a vast array of online content, raises significant questions about privacy, freedom of access.
Definitely big implications there. What else from the court?
They also ruled to allow parents to request exemptions for their children from specific educational materials or activities in public schools if they conflict with their religious beliefs.
Religious opt-outs.
Right. Highlights the importance of accommodating diverse religious perspectives.
Yeah.
Aims to ensure parental religious freedom is respected, though it also raises questions about curriculum standardization, inclusive learning environments. It's a balance.
Always a balance. And in the realm of political party dynamics, leaks. Anything noteworthy?
Well, there's been internal discussion within the Democratic Party about how to handle the situation with John Fetterman. One member reportedly stepping up to address it, hinting at maybe an internal rift or strategy adjustment.
Okay. And leaks.
Former President Trump called for the prosecution of Democrats he blames for leaking classified information about those U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities.
Why? What was in the leaks?
He cited preliminary intelligence assessments that reportedly contradicted official claims of effectiveness, making the leaks particularly damaging from his perspective.
Undermining the official narrative.
Exactly. And adding to this, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard accused media outlets of publishing illegally leaked assessments from the secure CapNet system.
CapNet, that's that.
It's a highly classified global network for intelligence sharing, designed for the most sensitive national security communications. Any leaks from it are profoundly damaging to intelligence operations, relationships with allies.
Right. Leaking from that system is a major breach. Okay, let's move across the Atlantic. The UK's political landscape also has its share of twists and turns. Welfare reforms.
Yes, UK Labour Party leader Keir Starmer made a strategic move, announced a welfare climb down in a deal with Labour rebels.
A climb down, what does that involve?
Involved 2BN concessions on welfare reforms, specifically designed to maintain party unity, quell a potentially damaging labor revolt.
So avoiding a party split. But what about the policy itself?
Well, the prime minister expressed confidence in the government's initial choice. But Starmer's decision, despite aiming for cohesion, has raised fears of potential tax rises among the public.
And the cost.
Projected to cost up to £3 billion for disability benefits alone.
$3 billion. That's significant.
It is. BBC's political editor Chris Mason characterized it as a hat trick of U-turns. Awkward implications for the prime minister suggest maybe a reactive approach to policy.
A hat trick of U-turns. Doesn't sound great. Okay, and then there's this sensitive revelation about MI6.
Yes. Blaise Metroelli, anticipated to be the first woman to lead MI6, the UK's foreign intelligence service. Reports indicate she's the granddaughter of a Ukrainian Nazi collaborator known as Butcher, involved in wartime atrocities.
Wow. That's a difficult family history for someone in that position.
Extremely. MI6 is reportedly taking steps to distance her from her grandfather's past. Meanwhile, reports suggest Russia is trying to use these family ties to undermine her appointment, so discord.
Trying to exploit it.
Seems likely. But the consensus among intelligence folks is clear. Metroelli's professional record should be judged independently of her grandfather's actions. Merit over inherited history.
A very delicate situation. Personal history, high-stakes international intelligence, highlights the intense scrutiny these roles bring. Okay, let's zoom out again. Look at the broader global economy and the ever-advancing technological frontiers reshaping our world. All right, starting with economic indicators, trade dynamics, the U.S. markets seem like a mixed bag recently, reflecting caution, maybe some optimism.
Yeah, exactly. The Dow made gains, partly on news that former President Trump was reportedly considering an early replacement for the Fed chair. That always gets markets buzzing about potential policy shifts.
Right, and futures climbed too.
S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100 futures climbed, yeah. Even surpassed all-time intraday highs ahead of key inflation data releases.
But there's a paradox here, isn't there, between inflation and spending?
There really is. It's crucial for understanding the current climate. The Fed's preferred inflation gauge showed price increases accelerated in May, so persistent inflation.
Okay.
But U.S. consumer spending fell in May by most this year, dropped 0.3% after adjusting for inflation.
So inflation rising, but people are spending less.
Exactly. It suggests that while some parts of the economy are heating up, ordinary consumers are feeling the pinch, pulling back on discretionary spending. Could signal a potential slowdown, maybe even stagflationary pressures, complicates the Fed's decisions going forward.
Definitely tricky for the Fed. And the dollar.
Lingering near a 3-12-year low, traders are wagering on future U.S. rate cuts. That sentiment is actually fueling positive trends in Asian stocks as investors look for higher returns elsewhere.
A complex picture indeed. Conflicting signals everywhere. What about U.S.-China trade? Any movement there?
Actually, yes. Renewed optimism for progress in trade talks. That lifted investor sentiment, which in turn weakened the U.S. dollar a bit.
And specific outcomes.
The Treasury Secretary now expects an acceleration of China's export of minerals to the U.S. That's significant given how critical those minerals are for tech and manufacturing supply chains.
Right. Critical minerals. And any impact on the ground.
Yeah, this is fascinating. China's landmark inland trade hub has seen a significant traffic increase, nearly 6% higher, following a truce in the tariff war.
So a direct link between diplomacy and economic activity.
Absolutely. Shows how quickly global supply chains can respond to policy shifts.
But trade policies can cut both ways, right? Negative impacts, too.
For sure. Take Nike, for example. The sportswear giant anticipates that tariffs imposed by former President Trump could cost the company a staggering $1 billion.
$1 billion just from tariffs.
That's their projection. A direct, substantial hit to their bottom line illustrates the huge financial ripple effects of geopolitical trade decisions on major corporations.
Definitely. And while we're on China, things aren't all smooth sailing domestically for them.
No, not entirely. Its faltering economy, the world's second largest, is reportedly suffering from weak household consumption. That's a critical growth driver.
And specific sectors.
Their auto industry in particular is described as particularly vulnerable, facing challenges like oversupply, slowing demand, broader implications for global manufacturing and trade there.
Okay, now contrast that with Russia. Their economy seems surprisingly resilient, despite all the sanctions.
It has surprised many observers, yes. It's one of the most sanctioned countries globally. But Russian Finance Minister Anton Siluanov asserted Russia's economic resilience, said the economy expanded more than 4% and real incomes rose over 7% last year.
Wow. How are they managing that?
Suggests they found ways to adapt, maybe through redirected trade, boosting domestic demand.
And this resilience connects to India's energy strategy.
Directly. India significantly increased its imports of Russian thermal coal in May, hit a 2-year high of 1.3 million tons.
Why the increase?
Attributed to the availability of high-quality coal and flexible pricing, makes it attractive, cost-effective for India, even though Indonesia is still their top supplier overall.
So a strategic energy move for India.
Exactly. For India, which relies on coal for 70% of its energy, this is about securing resources on favorable terms. Shows how geopolitical shifts can alter traditional trade routes and partnerships.
Fascinating. Okay, from economics to innovation, let's explore the evolving and really explosive landscape of technology and AI.
It's moving incredibly fast.
Venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz, 16Zs, they think an AI startup called Cluely is the new blueprint.
That's right. Cluely's slogan is cheat on everything, which is provocative.
Definitely catches the attention. What's their focus?
Not necessarily creating entirely novel tech. It's more about iterative product enhancement based on user feedback. Constantly refining, improving based on what users actually need and want.
That iterative approach seems key in tech now.
It really does. And speaking of ambition, get this. There's an AI-powered startup studio aiming to launch 100,000 companies a year.
100,000.
A year. Not a typo. The sheer scale is mind-boggling. Suggests a profound belief in AI's ability to democratize entrepreneurship, rapidly generate new ventures.
Incredible ambition. But as AI advances so quickly, so do the concerns, right? Ethics, regulation, misinformation.
Absolutely. They go hand in hand.
Yep.
We saw Mr. Beast, the YouTuber, face public backlash and remove an AI thumbnail tool he'd implemented. Shows community feedback shaping AI integration.
Right, and regulatory pushback is happening too.
Definitely. Germany's data protection commissioner called for Apple and Google to remove the Chinese AI app DeepSeek from app stores.
Why DeepSeek?
Cited unlawful transfer of German user data to China under the EU's GDPR rules. Highlights that growing tension between global tech and national data sovereignty. AI still has to comply with data protection laws.
A global challenge. And the misinformation threat getting worse.
Seems so. There was a stark warning recently. A viral video showing an explosion at Evin prison in Iran was determined to be likely AI fake.
An AI-generated fake video of something like that.
Yeah. Powerfully raises awareness about the dissemination of manipulated content, how easy it's becoming, and the critical importance of verifying information. It's getting harder to tell what's real, puts the onus on us as consumers of media.
Definitely makes you think twice before sharing something. But there are innovative applications of AI too, right? Positive ones.
Oh, for sure. It's not just software. Redwood Materials, founded by Tesla co-founder J.B. Straubel, launched a new energy storage business.
What's their plan?
Ingenious, really. They plan to use old EV batteries to store energy, and their first target, those incredibly energy-intensive AI data centers.
Using old batteries for data centers, that's smart.
It's a fantastic example of the circular economy, turning waste into a resource for a new, energy-hungry technology.
Great example. And on the consumer side?
The Double app apparently impressed users, provided extraordinary experiences, simplified tasks, signals a significant milestone in app development and AI integration, shows AI enhancing daily life in practical ways.
Okay. But finally, we need to touch on the social impact of digital tech. Not always positive.
Unfortunately, no. Social media and other platforms can amplify assaults on gender and sexual minorities. Reports show online trolling and image-based abuse are common, pervasive forms of harassment in places like Pakistan.
So the darker side of connectivity.
Exactly. Highlights the urgent need for digital safety, accountability online.
A critical point. Technology's impact isn't uniformly positive. Okay, for our final section, let's look at public health. Some compelling human interest stories and a few truly unexpected discoveries that round out our dive. All right, let's start with public health and some concerning news potentially affecting millions.
What's this?
The promise of victory over HIV is diminishing as the U.S. withdraws its support.
Withdraws support. That's huge.
Yeah, impacting critical initiatives and treatments globally. Raises significant worries about potential setbacks in fighting HIV, accessing treatments, especially in regions heavily reliant on U.S. aid. Could lead to a resurgence.
That's a grave development, undermining decades of hard-won progress, a real potential tragedy.
It really is. And another public health debate reflecting shifting public sentiment. involves vaccines.
Yes, RFK Jr.'s successful campaign against thimerosal.
Thimerosal, that's the preservative.
Right. A rare but safe ingredient in some flu shots, according to scientific consensus. But his campaign led the CDC advisory panel to vote to stop recommending flu vaccines containing it.
Even though it's considered safe.
Yes. The decision, framed as a precaution, aligns closely with the long-standing objectives of the anti-vaccine movement, which targeted thimerosal for years despite lack of evidence of harm at the doses used.
So public pressure influencing public health guidance over scientific findings.
Seems that way in this case. Now, looking at healthcare system challenges, the NHS in England still battling wait times.
Yes. Currently, fewer than 60% of patients are meeting the target of not waiting longer than 18 weeks for elective treatment.
Fewer than 60%. That's a lot of people waiting for essential care. Highlights those systemic pressures on public health care.
Definitely. And a truly stark statistic on a global scale.
This one's shocking. A report reveals that 1 in 6 cancer drugs in 4 African nations are defective.
1 in 6 defective how?
Meaning substandard, falsified, or expired, impacts millions of vulnerable patients, compromises treatment, raises profound concerns about global health equity, access to safe medication.
That's horrifying. Meanwhile, back in the UK, weather concerns.
Yes, health alerts issued ahead of an anticipated second heat wave. Temperature is expected up to 34 degrees C, that's 93 degrees Fahrenheit, urging precautions, especially for the elderly and vulnerable.
Right. Heat waves are serious health risks. On a more positive note, mental health.
Yes, Dr. David H. Rosmarin, a Harvard Medical School professor, he's sharing insights on how startup founders can actually harness anxiety to their benefit.
Harness anxiety, how does that work?
It's a fascinating perspective, transforming a typically negative emotion into a tool for productivity, resilience, a useful skill for anyone in high-pressure situations, not just founders.
Interesting take. Okay, shifting to crime and justice. Some high-profile convictions recently.
Yes, some quite shocking ones. Japan executed the Twitter killer Takahiro Shiraishi.
Ah, I remember that case. Horrific.
Truly heinous crimes. Murdered and dismembered 9 people after luring them via social media. His execution marks a significant development in justice for the victims. A chilling reminder of online dangers.
Absolutely. And in the UK?
A man was found guilty of murdering his wife in a knife attack in Bradford while she was pushing their baby in a pram. Just horrific domestic violence.
Terrible. And in the sports world, some cases.
Tampa Bay Rays baseball player Wander Franco was found guilty in a sexual abuse case. Received a suspended sentence, no prison time. Raised serious questions about athlete behavior, accountability.
Suspended sentence. That often causes controversy.
It does. Separately, Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking trial is reaching its conclusion. Closing arguments happening, bringing that high-profile, complex case towards its end.
Okay. Now, beyond those serious cases, there were some truly unusual incidents making headlines.
Oh, definitely. The bizarre story of a passenger forcibly dragged off a Thai Lion Air flight.
Why? What happened?
Apparently, after a tantrum over a denied seat change, highlights the growing challenges airlines face with passenger behavior.
Yeah, you hear more about those incidents and the dog kicking incident.
Right. An Egyptian traveler facing federal charges for kicking a Customs and Border Protection beagle at Dulles Airport.
Kicking a CBP beagle.
Seriously. The dog, Canine Buddy, had detected over 100 pounds of prohibited food products. So, Buddy was doing his job despite the assault.
Good boy, Buddy. Definitely not your everyday airport story. And some security concerns, too.
Yes, a sobering reminder of constant vigilance needed. 4 people arrested on terror charges after spraying military planes during a break-in at RAF Bryce Norton in the UK. A significant breach.
Wow. And threats against officials.
A man arrested trying to enter Milwaukee Police Chief Jeffrey Norman's home. Raises concerns about targeted threats against law enforcement.
Serious stuff. And the Taylor Swift concert plot.
In Germany, a Syrian teenager charged with plotting to attack a Taylor Swift concert stadium with explosives shows how global threats can manifest in unexpected local venues.
Truly frightening. And sadly, a death in custody.
Yes, a Canadian man held by immigration officials died in a South Florida federal facility, prompting questions about detention conditions, migrant welfare. It seems danger, both bizarre and serious, is everywhere, demands constant vigilance.
It definitely highlights the multifaceted nature of security and public safety. Okay, let's try to end on a more expansive, maybe inspiring note. Space exploration, culture, surprising discoveries.
Sounds good. Let's start with Mars. NASA's rover Curiosity is still going strong.
Still active up there.
Very much so. Benefiting from rising temperatures after the Martian winter means more energy for science experiments.
What has it been doing?
It's been busy. Brushing a rock target called Hornitos with its wire brush.
Cleaning rocks on Mars.
Yeah. Conducting APXS analysis, that's its spectrometer, analyzes elemental composition of rocks, soil, helps understand geological history, potential past life.
Amazing tech.
It really is. It's also captured images of another feature, Iparavi, undertaken a 37-meter drive to new locations and performed atmospheric studies, measuring argon gas levels.
Why argon gas?
It helps track how Mars lost its atmosphere over billions of years. Crucial clues about climate evolution on other planets. That little rover is definitely earning its keep, still sending back groundbreaking data.
Truly incredible. A testament to human ingenuity.
Yeah.
Now, in the world of cultural icons, a major departure.
Yes, Dame Anna Wintour, the iconic editor-in-chief of American Vogue, reportedly stepping down after 37 years.
37 years, that's an era ending.
Definitely signals a potential shift in the fashion landscape. Her influence was unparalleled.
Absolutely. And we lost a legend recently.
Sadly, yes. Lalo Schifrin, the renowned composer.
The Mission Impossible theme.
Exactly. And over 100 other film and TV scores. He passed away at 93 from pneumonia complications, left an indelible mark on Hollywood music with his distinctive, suspenseful style.
His music is unforgettable, really ingrained in our culture.
Totally. Now, celebrity and sport. Quite a mix here. Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez got married in Venice.
The star-studded wedding, yeah. Kim Kardashian, Oprah attended. A real media gathering.
He seems like it. For sports fans, Manchester City's recent dominant performance raised the question, are Man City back?
Always a big question in football. And tennis.
British sensation Emma Raducanu is set to face fellow British teenager Emma Shue at Wimbledon. Promising matchup, highlighting emerging talent.
Good for British tennis. Other sports news.
Leicester City Football Club parted ways with manager Ruud van Nistelrooy. New direction there. In rugby, England captain Owen Farrell backed Samoan center Luther Burrell, called him hungry but humble, expects an impact. Real Madrid showcased a dominant performance in the Club World Cup.
And a unique story about a Welsh goalkeeper.
Yes, Sophia Middleton Patel, an autistic elite footballer. She shared her challenges, rewards, expressed immense love for her fans, but also a profound dread at meeting them, due to sensory and social pressures.
Wow. That's incredibly honest and powerful.
It really is. A vulnerable insight into elite sports and neurodiversity. Reminds us of athletes' unique experiences beyond just their performance.
What a remarkable athlete and story. Okay, finally, an archaeological find and a natural event. Reminders of deep history and powerful forces.
Yeah, this archaeology discovery is amazing. In the Amazon rainforest, a fallen tree revealed something incredible.
What did it reveal?
A previously hidden pre-Columbian indigenous burial site, complete with 7 massive ceramic urns, intricately crafted from local materials.
The tree falling uncovers centuries of history.
Imagine a direct connection to a past civilization just revealed by a storm?
Incredible. And the natural event? Less positive, I assume.
Unfortunately, yes. In Venezuela's Merida state, a stark reminder of nature's power. A swollen river washed away homes.
Oh no. How many affected?
Over 270 families after heavy rainfall. Demonstrates the devastating impact of climate-related events, community vulnerability.
A tough reality. Okay. What a journey through the headlines today.
It really was. From the delicate balance of international nuclear diplomacy shifting global alliances.
To the economic currents influencing markets, those intriguing AI advancements.
And we've also touched on the very human stories embedded within these larger narratives. Public health concerns, surprising discoveries, the complexities of justice. It all defines our modern world.
Remember, understanding these diverse threads, well, it helps you connect the dots. See how global events ripple down, affect individuals, communities.
And how local stories can sometimes reflect broader societal trends shaping our collective future.
Absolutely. So as you go about your day, maybe consider this.
What seemingly small piece of news, perhaps tucked away in a corner of your feed, might actually be the early tremor of a much larger global earthquake in the making.
How will today's deep dive change how you look at tomorrow's headlines? Maybe prompt you to dig just a little deeper into those underlying connections.